Hello, everyone. I believe we are live. If you guys can hear me, can you just do a thumbs up? Wonderful. And everyone, great. Good. We've got some great people. Hi, River. Glad to see you in. A few technical issues at the beginning. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we'll go ahead and kick off because we've got an exciting session. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Quantum CISO Roundtable. I'm really pleased to be here with such an incredible group of security leaders, innovators, technologists. Our panel are people who are not only shaping how we respond to today's cyber challenges, but preparing for the next era of security itself. My name is Audrey Nickel. I'm the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer here at ExeQuantum. It's my privilege to moderate this section, which is all about kind of connecting the dots between technology, the risk in the boardroom, and really unpacking what quantum safety really means in practice. We're going to keep this session open and engaging. Our panelists bring deep expertise from across industries. So I encourage you guys to jump in, list your questions on the side. We've got a couple polls that we'll use, so engage with those. And then at the end of the session, what we'll do is take some time to get to those questions. If we don't get to all of them, we will follow up with detailed answers as well. So again, very much a shared conversation, not a lecture. Be sure to engage. So with that said, let's dive in and we'll start with brief introductions from our panelists. So Sam, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, about me, I'm Sam. I'm the founder, co-founder and CEO of ExeQuantum, which is one of Australia's leading PQC company, as well with global presence. So we have activity including in the US, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and of course Australia. And we have been doing a lot of practical work focusing on the remediation side of PQC migration, and of course around the awareness raising, as it is a crucial part of the whole ordeal. So that's basically it.
Right, thank you. Why don't we head over to Brad? Give us an intro.
It was likely to be Brad because I'm Brad Bush. So if we're going in alphabetical order, g'day everyone, I'm Brad. I'm a CISO and I'm a board member. Ironically, I started with a degree in astronomy and astrophysics. I followed up with a degree in aerospace engineering, and I can tell you that quantum mechanics is not rocket science. It's much harder. As Simon said, no one understands it. Your wristwatch is already a quantum computer. Its semiconductors rely on the quantum nature of the universe, but they're not quantum enough to keep, they are quantum enough to keep your phone alive. They're just not quantum enough if your wristwatch is wondering if it's Schrodinger's cat.
It's fascinating background, absolutely fascinating. All right, we'll just jump in, Billy.
IT. We do boring things for interesting people. So what that means is we do cybersecurity, governance, risk, and compliance, as well as virtual CISO services. We also do modernization and cloud projects, with the idea being that we're an IT provider that's accountable to industry standards. We work with everything from early stage SaaS companies, IoT and robotics, through to major retailers and non-for-profits.
Awesome. Awesome. Sandeep.
Thank you, Audrey. So Sandeep Talung. I'm working as a cybersecurity professional in the Victorian government. But my first, if I may say, interaction with quantum was the Big Bang Theory. I'm sure all of you have probably looked into it. And the theory of everything, where quantum world can actually interact with the real world, and how the if I may say, the borders are undefined. So I'm looking forward to bring my passion and the profession together with quantum and cyber together in the near future.
Awesome. And River, to you.
Hi, I'm a CISO board member as well. I actually started my degree in AI working for State Street Associates. I think quantum computing is absolutely fascinating, as is cryptography. But what I'm here to do is to demystify it. I don't think tackling this problem needs to be overly complex or technical. So anyone can do it, and anyone can start now.
I love that. And we've got on the panel, we've got with Sandeep as well, that bridging between quantum and AI and how they work in tandem. I'm really interested in and I know our audiences as well in hearing about how we actually bridge those digital divides to work together in tandem and not in opposite spectrums. So we will just jump right in. Sam, if you don't mind, when we say quantum threat, kind of what do we actually mean by that in relating to kind of existing cryptography, and really what is PQC?
Right. Maybe I'll start a bit with the higher level, because it is a very, very large-scale question, really. Like PQC is a acronym for post-quantum cryptography. All of which I think are quite complex. Like post is the idea of abstract idea of after. Quantum is quantum physics, quantum computing. I don't know when I even begin. And cryptography is also a fascinating but complex field. But essentially, cryptography is what's necessary for our technological society to stay technological. Without exaggerating, if not for cryptography, we are basically unable to do anything, including send money over the internet, including sending messages, including literally anything, because then it can not only be viewed, but also altered and tampered with. So essentially, cryptography is what keeps all of those things intact. And that is great. However, technological advances also can break said cryptography. So as we continue advancing, especially in the quantum space, the cryptographic systems that protect basically our entire digital society needs to evolve accordingly. And that's where PQC comes in. It's essentially a natural next step, because cryptography has always been broken, always needed to evolve. And this is just that step, but on steroids, because we're talking about literally our embedded cryptography in any aspect of technology at this point.
That's awesome. Yeah, great. So Sandeep, I'm curious, so Sam kind of talked about how important cryptography is to kind of keep businesses in business, so to speak. And this relates to why it needs to be adopted. What do you think the biggest challenges that you see in industry when it comes to quantum safety kind of on a larger scale?
Sure. First of all, Sam, good job in explaining quantum, because either you can explain it accurately or in a way that people will understand. You can't do both in a way, one form or another, right? So see, from the industry perspective, I think there are three main challenges that we are looking. The first thing is the visibility. And we can't protect what we can't see problem. And that is something that ACSC has also highlighted in their recent paper, where they have focused organizations to start working on creating a comprehensive cryptographic bills of material. It is a fancy name of creating a list of all the technologies where the cryptography is used, which means your operating system, network protocols, applications, APIs, and as such. So that's the first thing, like understanding the nitty-gritties of it. The second challenge is the scale and the scope. Like transitioning from existing cryptographic controls to the PQC world is not a software patch like the way we see it in industry. It's actually you're talking about breaking everything down and building bottom up, which is huge, complex, time consuming, and as well as cost and expertise. So the high cost, the sheer complexity of integrating new algorithm into the aging infrastructure. So some of the uh, technology is working for many, many decades without breaking. And now we have to actually go under the hood and check how they are operating and are they PQC compliant. And that may result in potential unplanned disruption. So these are the 2 or 3 things that as an industry we are struggling with.
They're meaty 3 things, aren't they? Very meaty. So, and I think, when it comes to, obviously, this is a field that I came into, kind of been in the realm of cybersecurity, but with quantum was new to me. And one of the questions, Brad, would love to hear from you, with Sandeep talking about why this is important to industry. And I love those top 3 challenges. Why would everyday users care about this, and do we need to care? So not the system owners and the organizations, but the people, checking their Gmail, using WhatsApp on the internet. Oh, we always have to have one. We've got to mute. Oh, that's all right. Let's see. Then why don't we ask Billy? I know we've got Brad is just muted. Billy, do you have any thoughts on why the everyday user should care about this? Do I care? It's which one of my internet providers is safer than the other? Can I continue to use WhatsApp as an end user?
Yeah, well, talking to third-party risk, a lot of the breaches that we've seen in the last few years are a failure of removing privileged access accounts for third-party vendors or monitoring those accounts. So even as a consumer user or any of those kind of things, you have to see yourself as you're using third-party products, you're giving access to your private information and things that can easily be ripped away. So we're all getting, even my 80-year-old father's getting used to using multi-factor as the world evolves, bringing in what are not simple technologies, but viewing them as the end user as a simple thing, which is there a layer there to protect me? Even to use another modern analogy or buzzword, like crypto is a very big thing that everyone's interacting with. The amount of crypto agencies that still don't use multi-factor and have lost oodles of money and oodles of client trust because they refuse to do the basics, let alone something like that.
Yeah, look, it makes sense. It makes sense, and I know as a everyday user, but also as a system owner. So in my role, I quite often purchase, marketing automation softwares or CRMs, and I think that I've got my everyday user, but then I've got my role as a system owner and purchaser. And I think one of the things that has been highlighted to me is not just in my own kind of personal use, making sure that I'm aware of these standards, but as a system owner, making sure that my vendors are up to date with their cryptology, their security. And I think, Brad, are you back on? Didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
Well, look, hopefully that's back on.
Yes.
Yeah, you're on.
Hey, there we go. Browser plugins, gotta love them. Sorry.
Yeah.
So okay, back to the question, like why should users care? Why should I care today? There are some things that you can do with quantum phenomenon, particularly quantum computing, that you couldn't do yesterday. And one of those things that quantum computing can do is solve large problems really fast. And when we're looking at particular types of maths problems, those problems can be solved very, very fast, as in one cycle, just one question, rather than having to take the known age of the universe to answer that. So those things are why cryptography is getting weaker, because it relies on large maths problems. But there are some other problems that are large maths problems, like training AI. What if you could retrain your AI in seconds, not days, not weeks, not months? Quantum also has some other really interesting opportunities around sensing. What if you could make a radio detector the size of an atom? What if you could make a quantum gravity sensor? And so if you look at something like GPS, we all rely on GPS to get where we are today and for our cars to navigate. Our GPS relies on a radio signal that broadcasts time from geostationary orbit, just in case anyone's wondering, from multiple satellites. That signal can be jammed. And in fact, GPS can break. What if you could make an unbreakable equivalent of GPS by having a gravity map of the world and have a single atom that was able to tell you the direction that gravity was pointing, so you could know exactly where you were on the face of the planet? So there are some really interesting opportunities that are coming that will absolutely disrupt our industry, but they'll actually make what we do day to day much safer.
Wow. Things like that, I think, are incredible for people who haven't necessarily been as involved in quantum to hear about. In terms of an unbreakable GPS, I definitely would need that as someone who's directionally challenged, and if I rely on it heavily. And that's actually a great lead into my question for River. So if we're talking about kind of, if we switch a bit and talk about the nuts and bolts into kind of applied strategies. So we know it's critical for organizations to adopt quantum safe technology, PQC standards, protocols. But what would you say are the key strategies that companies and organizations can use to adopt these standards?
Yeah, sure. So I think Sandeep's message mentioned some things already. I mean, the biggest one is understanding where everything is. So you've got to build that inventory out. You've got to do some discovery. Looking at your network protocols. What are you using digital signing for anything? Look at your PKI and looking at your IoT devices. If you're in the medical space, medical IoT devices as well, like that. That's real legacy systems. Looking at all of that, looking where you're using public keys as well, looking at your backups, your messaging, how you currently are encrypting things. So once you've looked at all of that, then start to map out your dependencies as well between everything. And then start to look at, what are the standards that have already been developed. NIST has got some, ISO has, Europe's got some great ones, ACSC has as well. So really understanding what are your obligations for your industry and then having a look at what's that gap. So then taking that back into looking against your discovery and your inventory list and working out, well, what can I do now? Where can I start? Are there ways that I can start to implement crypto agility throughout my ecosystem? And look for those quick wins, low-hanging fruit, things that will be really simple to, elevate the ciphers on, and you're not going to break things. And then really test it. So, start small, have that kind of sandbox environment where you can really start to test things and make sure that, it's safe to proceed to production, work out exactly what your backup plans are where possible. Backup plans could be, looking at a hybrid model. So you've still got the old standards and you're moving to newer updated ones. So yeah, that's probably where I'd look. Looking at your certificates as well, try to shorten those life cycles where possible. They tend to be really long and outdated, especially for legacy systems. I work, in the health industry, and that's a persistent problem there. So, and I guess like kind of the overarching layer on top of all of this, which we've all known about, from a cyber perspective, is protect your data. Look at data loss prevention.
Absolutely.
Adversaries right now are, they're taking data that's heavily encrypted, and they're going to decrypt it later. So they don't care. So that's like real primary thing, like your data governance. Like if you're looking at your data, you've got really old, long-lasting data, and it's, it's got weak encryption. Do you still need it? Can you get rid of it? Why do you have that risk in your environment? Start having a look at that, and protecting your crown jewels. So that's probably where it's just a
That's great
strategy.
advice. Yeah, and I think it is.
If I can add to that.
Sam.
Yeah, I think that you made a really good point with the whole start small, because I've spoken to a lot of companies who are extremely overwhelmed by the whole task. They're like, how are we supposed, we're handling, millions of transactions. How are we supposed to start securing them all without disruption? And the truth is you don't have to secure them all. You start with the, like you said, low-hanging fruits, the easier ones, the more urgent one, you make a priority list, and then you can do it gradually.
Definitely. No, you start to build out your roadmap. And I think it's starting small with the ones that, may not be critical. You can at least start to flesh out your process and what works. So then you can target some of the critical systems later, and feel confident that process works.
Yeah. And I think you touched on, obviously,
start
now.
Yeah,
you're going through a refresh life cycle. If you aren't refreshing your IT assets at least yearly as some part of your infrastructure, and start making sure that the things you're procuring will support the future across their life cycle. There was a great article today about Westpac doing exactly this, buying new Cisco routers for all their branches and making sure that they were post-quantum and algorithmically agile. Yeah. And I'm expecting questions in the chat about those two words.
No, definitely. that ability to be able to switch between algorithms, I think is essential. That's going to be the game changer for organizations. Being, we started with, in a project sense where you were looking at things that were really clunky to get things done. And then a lot of organizations to get, to become more mobile and a bit more innovative, they look to implement enterprise agile to do things. It's the same thing here. That agility gives you that flexibility and that comfort to kind of move at ease, to know that, okay, great, like my suppliers are also crypto agile. I am too. If I need to move fast, I can. If quantum computing comes a lot faster than we think we do, it will. You've got that flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You gotta change. This is a complete change of mentality on how we view cryptography in general. Also, kind of adding to your point, Trevor, like people have no problem making it more agile when it comes to implementing new features or being able to update some monetary, like clear ROI features. And if it's just cryptography catching up, because for 40 years it was fine, all good, all hard coded. Now it's not. We are heading towards essentially what I call the wild west of cryptography, where now we have all those new algorithms, and we gotta be a lot more adaptive.
Yeah. And just one quick warning there. So I mentioned in my statement, cryptography is based on difficult maths problems. What that means is when you get to small devices that are battery powered, that cryptography algorithm tends to be hardwired into the CPU as a encryption chip. And so whilst we've just talked about cryptography as software, please, if you've got cryptography embedded in your hardware, now is the time to start thinking about the change, and particularly in your refresh cycle.
Yeah, medical devices.
That's right. And those are, so I think you guys just touched on some really great points. Crypto agility, River, the harvest now to crypt later, talking about kind of the solvency and the life of data. If you've got very sensitive data that has a long lifespan, it's really important to make sure that is protected, because that is right for the harvest now to crypt later. And then what you guys also, like the infrastructure and hardware versus software, and that kind of leads, when we're talking about, I've worked in organizations that have very complex data systems. They have both. I know some of our clients now have got hardware and software, as Brad mentioned, and we're constantly evolving with the type of tech that we use, AI being one of them, proliferation of AI. And I know Sandeep, I know quite a few of you, so I'd love to, this conversation will be good. But speaking of that proliferation of AI, Sandeep, love to hear from you first. So how do AI and quantum work in tandem for better security?
Sure. And see, as a community, we try to segregate them in two different parts. So when we talk about quantum, we talk about chips, hardwares, and sensors and computers. Whereas when we talk about AI, we are thinking more on the software side of it and algorithms side of it. However, both of these technologies, although they are working in two separate realms, can be combined together, and they can work in a synergy for a better security, for overall security of the ecosystem. So few use cases where both of them can work together. So the first problem that I actually highlighted before was creating a C-bomb. Now, manually creating a C-bomb is going to take many, many years. So that's where I think AI can play a major role in going through the systems, applications, hardwares, and creating that library of the cryptographic keys, and which of the cryptographic keys are potentially going to be out of support in 2030 or 2035. So that's one place where AI can work together. The second thing is, although we are using AI for commercial purposes primarily, but the AI can also use in the future for testing PQC algorithm. So let's say if a new encryption research paper is put up, then AI can be used to test it in the real world and see the feasibility of it. So we can create like an AI-based test beds for new PQC technologies. And then the quantum and AI can, of course, support each other. As Brad was talking about, like we can use quantum computers to retrain AI in a much shorter space of time. That's going to be a game changer for the new AI models. Quantum can also be the new random number generation, which will be hard to crack, hard to detect, because they are working on the mathematical problem, which is unbreakable at this point in time. Another thing that the quantum can help is secure key distribution. So when we start sharing keys and AI is talking to AI mostly, that's where the quantum, if I may say, confidence will come into the picture. So these are the few areas where AI can and quantum technology can work together for better security.
Another intersection that I would potentially add is, I guess it's kind of the negative side of things. AI can actually pose a threat to asymmetric keys, which I think it's called differential attacks, where it can basically try to guess your keys faster than what a regular, like what a human or a regular computer would do. And where quantum comes in is a quantum random number generator is really good to counter that threat. So that's another, like, you know, interesting thing that's going on in the space.
Yeah. It is. And we've got a lot of activity happening in the chat, which is great. So I encourage everyone to kind of keep commenting. Fabulous. And then also, as we're going through, I'll be publishing some polls just on kind of that's relating to what the speakers are saying. River, I know you've got a very deep background in AI as well. Anything to add to that point that Sandeep was making?
Yeah, I think I echo all of that. I think that the two industries converging, I think, is going to be really exciting. I think it's going to, you know, have a lot of opportunity for us, but also equally a lot of risk. So being on the front foot, understanding where the potential adversaries are going to be, leveraging AI and quantum as well. You know, thankfully, you know, the access to quantum computers is not quite prevalent yet, but if, you know, if that changes, you know, we start to have adversaries also investing in that space, that's where things are going to get a bit interesting.
Awesome. And okay, and staying on you, River, and I know you actually kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, but if we just pose the question specifically, what should industry be thinking about when it comes to migration? And I guess as a PQC, and as part of that question, perhaps what should CISOs, IT, and business leaders kind of be doing now specifically? Is it engaging with solution providers? Is it, you know, awareness or education?
Yeah. I think it's really a bit of both. I think that there's, you know, a sentiment that quantum computing is still really far off. And I think that's, you know, while that can be true in one hand, at the same time, you've got to start now, because initiatives like this to kind of, you know, redo your entire infrastructure, just the infrastructure to manage you know, cryptographic keys, you know, cryptanalysis out there, you know, looking at breaking algorithms all the time. So things like that, and the proliferance of AI and it increasing the skills of adversaries as well to go out and steal the data. So all of these issues, they're happening right now. So if you're not starting now and you're starting to plan out how you're going to solve for this, you're going to be behind. And these initiatives, they can take years. You know, I've done one very long time ago. We didn't have AI. We didn't have the ability to go through our environment and have the assistance of AI to find out, you know, a full list of all of our ciphers and where things were being used and, you know, what were all of our network protocols. We had to do it manually. And so we did that, and we had to then chip away at each one and kind of guess at which, you know, is not going to break something, and, you know, start at a small hospital and just, you know, pray that we weren't going to break something. So, you know, that took a really long time, something that we thought, yep, we can get this done, you know, within maybe 6 months. No, it ended up being 3 years. So if you're not starting now, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So I would say, you know, start with your discovery. It's really easy to also have a look at the standards. There's a lot of documentation out there, a lot of people writing about it. There's people that are doing these implementations for organizations that need to focus on this a bit better and earlier than others. So there's already those use cases of, you know, how to do this well. So I think industry leaders and executive teams need to start to investigate that for themselves. And threat model your own environment and your own company and work out, you know, where will your risks come in, and start to have a plan for around that. Build out your roadmap. So it is all around, you know, discovery, looking at how you can be crypto agile, you know, upgrading your procurement questionnaires and your third-party risk questionnaires to include post-quantum computing questions on there. So that you can kind of be ahead of it. Then start, you know, looking at your legacy systems as well. Start to modernize those. Those often get put on the back burner. You know, now's the time to start to do that and to start to research around, you know, what system are you going to move to? Are they, do they have crypto agility at the forefront of their mind? Are they planning for it? These are all really simple questions that you can start to ask now. Very technical space in the field of security, but it doesn't, to solve for it, it doesn't need to be. At the end of the day, it's a GRC problem. It's risk management. And you need to get your head around that. And, most leaders understand that. So it's building out your governance, building out a roadmap, piloting hybrid solutions as well. So you've got that, rollback plan if you need to, if something breaks. Start speaking with the infrastructure teams and start to upgrade the infrastructure to be capable to handle it.
Yeah. Another thing I can add what River was mentioning is don't feel that you're alone in this journey. Like there is one thing that is good or for bad is most of the world is run by 20 companies like Microsoft of the world or Palo Alto of the world. And they are here to help. They are also on the same journey. They are also developing the solutions which are post-quantum enabled. So if you are thinking about it, go and talk to your vendors. They may already have a roadmap and you don't have to redefine and re-engineer the wheel. You can always work with where the world is going with them.
All very good advice. And I think as River, you mentioned, it's basically this is a highly technical field. And we've got certain organizations that will just, rely on vendors like ExeQuantum. Like we've got clients that are, with just us, but then we also have got clients that have got larger cybersecurity departments within. And so they're really looking at one of the things that has come up that we've heard is looking into the skill set that's needed to continue their PQC migration, their updates as they go on. Billy, I think as the CEO of an IT consultancy, and you're beautifully positioned to kind of help companies understand skill sets that may be lacking. What do you see as being something that these companies would need to understand when it comes to kind of upskilling or making sure that they've got the skill sets involved for the PQC migration, and what kind of resources can these organizations lean on to understand more around kind of this litmus test of, are they going to be able to, do they just need to work with vendors and partners? Are they able to bring this skill set in-house, et cetera?
It's unfortunately, it's like how long's a piece of string kind of assessment, but most businesses or organizations should be looking at themselves first. So the NABs, the Combanks, the Telstras and the Optuses, well, despite Optus's recent run of things, they've got the budgets. They can do things. They can go and buy an ExeQuantum fleet, but it's where you fall out of the ASX 100 when you're going to have to start having problems about, who do we engage with or who do we have in-house that can help us do this, and how do we get them the knowledge that they need. And that's the biggest problem facing 90% of Australia's businesses is they don't have huge budgets and they don't have huge teams. So it's how do you approach that? As Sandeep said, there's a lot of people out there that can help. I'm very biased towards the boutique consultancies and their ability to consult and deliver, as opposed to the big four, the cyber CXs and everything. The people that work within the industry know the faults of those businesses very well. They're very top heavy with very little ability to deliver, and they're not on the pulse. So they're still 3 or 4 years behind. They might release a white paper and drum up some leads, but they don't necessarily have the kit. Whereas in our business, for example, we tend to hire truck drivers and baristas and all these people that are like playing around at home with their own things and don't have formal educations, because they're a lot quicker to adapt at a basic, endpoint device kind of level, as opposed to hiring a enterprise architect that's got 40 years of waffling through meetings and delivering very little. So it's kind of understanding your business, and do you have a really good enterprise architect that can build the roadmap? Then okay, do we have the meat in the middle to do the project management and the high level, and then we've got the muscle behind that. So you've got to understand yourself first before you start trying to approach people, build skills and all these things, because a lot of the time you see someone comes to a webinar like this and they're like, hey, oh my God, we're falling behind. Knee-jerk reaction, throw a bunch of money against the wall, remove the budget, everyone gets burned, and they're like, we didn't deliver anything, we hate AI, this is not going to work for us. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
self-assess first, and then it goes through into maturity and governance and all those things, but also just like, who are the vendors in the market that we can work with, and they're getting bought out on almost on a weekly basis. So it's moving
Yeah.
as quick as AI is. So you've got to be very on the pulse and trying to figure out who's the best fit for you. And this is before you even talk things like budget and capability.
Yeah, I would also add that I would kind of take the approach regarding whether to take the big four versus smaller, like more agile vendors. That depends on your goals, really. Like if, for example, Microsoft said that they're going to finish their migration by 2033. And the issue is that the ASD guidelines say that you have until 2030, and that's same goes for some NIST guidelines for some regulated industries. So basically, you have Microsoft saying we are going to finish 3 years after the deadline that you need to abide by, and maybe that doesn't apply to something, maybe it applies to others. But I'm saying, like, it depends on the speed that you need it done by. It depends on what and like how much control you're okay with having versus giving up. It's a lot of factors that come into play when considering that.
Yeah, it's really important to understand how hard this is. Like Microsoft meant to turn off PIM, which is a very obscure product that no one understands, and they can't turn it off because most of the public education system is still using it. So that thing is old. That thing is like 1980s tech, and they still can't get rid of it. So you've got to give yourself a bit of leeway, because understanding that it's not going to be like a click and fix.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess on that, Brad, what do you see as the biggest challenges and risks in adopting PQC or just becoming quantum safe for organizations?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Billy. I want to riff on what Billy was saying. It's about the people. And our greatest challenge as governors is it's a formal defined bias. It's called recency bias, as in, I've not seen one of these happen before, and I don't know anyone else who's been hacked this way. So it's therefore not a problem. But it is a problem. And we've talked about the various guidelines. If we look at the best case, sufficiently powerful quantum computers might be available in 3 years. That's 2028. The worstish case is about 10 years. That's 2035. But our records retention requirement, if we all look at our records, we probably year requirement, and sorry, the CISO and me dies saying 7 years. It's 1, it could be 10, it could be something else. But let's just say it's 7 years. Well, 7 years from today is 2032. And so data breaches have happened today, but have not been disclosed or reported because the data was encrypted. And sometime in the next 7 years, that's a record, so that information will be useful, and that breached data could be read. And that's the harvest now, decrypt later strategy. But something that's important just to add on here is not all encryption is weak to quantum. So particularly, there's a couple of algorithms that everyone will know. If you want to go look them up, Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm. Shor's is about finding prime numbers. Grover's is about unsorted lists. And so only those types of encryption that rely on those mathematical problems are actually weak to quantum computers. There are other types of encryptions that are fundamentally strong, and that's what people mean when they talk about post-quantum algorithms, is there's some problems that we haven't worked out how to solve with quantum computers yet. The other thing to keep in mind is quantum computers aren't general purpose computers. They're very specific computers to solve very specific problems. And that's where the algorithm becomes really important. So for instance, I'm on the board of a school. That school has records keeping requirements that are up to 75 years in many cases. And in the cases of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, that is an infinite obligation. Those records must never be deleted. There's some, for the Australians in the room, you probably understand the reason why that might be. So we have to keep those records for a long time. But as a school, operationally, we need to know the medical diagnoses of our students so that we can provide appropriate care and adaptation in their education. And so our teachers need to know which students have which particular diagnosed needs. And the easy one to talk about here is being on the spectrum. Now, if you were to think about a nation state that has a plan of 50 years, I'm going to say this out loud, China has a 50-year plan and a 100-year strategy. What if one of those students that's in an Australian high school today with a diagnosed need is the Prime Minister of Australia in the next 20 years' time. And you could know that she sucked at physics and that she had a genuine behaviour problem when she was at school. Could you use that against the Prime Minister of Australia? And so I just wanted to give you that sense of both the risks and the challenges, and saying, well, today as leaders, with no budget to solve the problem and no recency bias that to drive us about why to solve it now, we also need to look at our role in terms of the future and say, well, what are our crown jewels? As Riven said, what are our crown jewels, and how do we protect them today, and also make sure that they're safe tomorrow? And there are plenty of options to be safe tomorrow.
Hearing
Sorry, long
about
answer to a short
those,
question.
no, that's great. And hearing about those applied kind of potential scenarios is really compelling. I know that we are getting close to time. We want to break over to some questions in just a moment. We've got some great ones from the panelists. But just a question, Sam, are there any sectors where you think the switch to quantum safe, or the evolution into quantum safe, is especially kind of tricky or urgent?
Well, where do I start? So I would say, yeah, definitely. Like when it comes to the urgency problem, I think that basically any place whose data is going to be relevant for more than 5 years, because as mentioned, according to Gartner, this is actually going to start in 2029. So we may have 3 years, because it's not going to start all in one go. It's going to start with the critical information, and then moving from there to the less critical ones. And I would say information like, say, passports, they stay relevant for 5 to 10 years. Credit cards, maybe their expiry date changes, but that's something you can brute force. That's when it comes to the trickier one, I mentioned, like, the older devices, like especially, for example, Windows. My wife, she's a teacher, and she has a Vista computer, for example, which, first of all, I said condolences. Second of all, this is not becoming quantum secure anytime soon, because at the end of the day, they can't really go back retroactively and make those updates, or they don't actually want to sometimes, like they want you to. And what's going to need to be happening is you're going to have to throw out those devices and buy new ones, because for them it's just impossible. Basically where over-the-air updates are impossible for hardware, I think we're going to have to think of like either a plan to retrofit PQC into those devices, or have a plan on how to switch those devices in the most environmentally friendly way, rather than face like the biggest increase to our junk pile in history, essentially. So I would say the urgent ones is the ones where information is relevant for the next 10 years. Really important to start now. The tricky ones, we need to think of different plans altogether, because sometimes they're just not viable to just outright integrate PQC. And even if it is possible to integrate PQC, it might not be viable to integrate crypto agility. Like maybe you can get that one-time update done, but then what if lattice-based cryptography breaks, which is a possibility? We're gonna need to do it all over again, or is there a way to integrate crypto agility? Like it's I suspect what is gonna need to happen eventually is just a phase out of those devices altogether, which might be for the best in the long term.
And just quickly piling on what Sam was saying about his wife as a teacher, as a board member of a school, I'd say talk to your CFO. I'm going to give you a superpower. Talk about depreciation of your assets, because once those assets reach $0 value, they should be replaced, and we can afford to replace them, because we've actually accounted for them to be replaced. And so we can actually use all of our business to solve our quantum problem by dealing with our finances, by dealing with our technology, and by dealing with our governance.
So is it fair to say, if we're kind of looking at sectors when the kind of urgency versus tricky, with the urgency, what I've kind of picked up on is we've got sectors that kind of store a process or send data that have sensitive information that remains sensitive for a time, the harvest now decrypt later. Then also, you guys spoke earlier about the physical infrastructure that's hard to update. So looking at those longer technology refresh cycles. Obviously, we know that software is much easier to update than hardware. So perhaps those sectors that have that type of infrastructure and those longer tech refresh cycles, the urgency is probably a little bit more compelling there. And then with the tricky, does that complex physical infrastructure also play a role here? Kind of the less standard or niche protocols, are they less likely to have a clear path to PQC migration? Did I just?
I can start us off there. So we manage, I don't know, maybe 1,000 users over 20 or 30 different businesses. Most businesses don't even know what they have. So the first thing we do is do an assessment, and then like, cool, this is what a 5-year roadmap looks like, and these are the things you're going to have to pay for. And it's the hardest part of our job is getting them to just commit to it. It's like, look, we can keep that switch or that router running for another 2 years. You're like, absolutely not. It's 7 years old. It needs to go. So I'm just saying that in terms of it's a challenging part before you even start talking about the future of computing and quantum computing, when you're kind of having to use analogies to be like, the future's changing. When your grandparents used a computer the size of the room, and then your grandkids had a laptop. Now that's happening again. You just need to be aware of it, because most executives are over 50 or 60. So it's just an interesting challenge, the people challenge.
There are. Okay, now we've got just about 12 minutes, and I want to get to a couple of these questions from the panelists, and we won't get to all of them, but I certainly will, as we mentioned, answer those and send them out to everyone that has attended the webinar. So let's start with one that's gotten the most upvotes, from Harvey. Harvey, thank you for asking the question. So to the panelists, what role will biometric credentials play?
I can try to answer that. So I think that what biometrics are going to do is they're going to work in tandem with post-quantum digital signatures, essentially tying biometrics to cryptography, because one of the advantages of biometrics is that they are relatively frictionless and unique. Cryptography, however, at the end of the day, they can be eventually spoofed. They can be deep-faked. They can be deep-faked, like voice or like even fingerprints sometimes can find a way to be faked. So at the end of the day,
and even worse, they can't be changed.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you can't really change your face. Well, not without a lot of money. If you have been like deepfaked, if your data was taken and now your face is used. So I think it is overall a different sector, though. Like it is about confirming your identity. However, I do think that the intersection will be the digital signatures tied to your identity, either via biometrics, like a one-time biometrics that's confirmed to be you manually, which then can be tied to you because cryptography cannot be deepfaked, or some other type of intersection. But I think we are already kind of working on a way to make that happen, on creating your own digital signature tied to your identity using your one-time biometric key, because that way it's a manual process to create that key to begin with, but once that's done, you're good for a while. So hope that answers.
I understood very, very little of that, but I'm sure our panelists and our audience understood a lot more. So another question. What about QKD and the crypto in-depth approach? This is from Luciano. Is it something worth investing time to evaluate now? What are your thoughts about that?
Could I have a quick go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So have a different think about PKI. PKI is computationally very expensive, private key cryptography. It means we both share a part of the answer. So one of the things that PKI is used to do is to distribute a secure key. And there's some algorithms that sit behind that. Let's not go there. One of the really key things about quantum key distribution is it now allows us to share a key, to share it uniquely and to share it in such a way as we will know if anyone was ever listening in. And so the most, still by far and away, the most secure encryption is called one-time pads. I have a pad, you have a pad, they have the same code on it. We use that code to encrypt. Quantum is not powerful against one-time pads. And so what QKD allows us to do is to distribute two keys, two one-time pads, in a way that two remote users, two remote organizations can agree on what the key should be right now today. And I think that's super powerful.
Super powerful, but I fear that organizations will say it's also very friction. Like it's got a lot of friction in that. Like, you know, that's quite slow and the kind of coordination of that is difficult. But yeah, I mean, one-time pads are unbreakable. So if quantum computing can potentially solve the speed at which they can be used throughout organizations, I think that could be an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah. And I think that's the moment we sit in. It might just become true today or tomorrow or in 10 years' time. And when it is true, we're going to need to change the way we think about our approach to encryption.
I would argue a bit. I mean, I'll just from my investigation around it. QKD is a very powerful approach, and I think this is definitely worth investigating as an R&D. Because at the moment it is very limited in terms of its use cases, and even then, even when it is usable, like say in some of the pilots in Singapore, the distance is limited to around 150 kilometers, which is decent. Like you can create basically a city out of it, like a quantum internet. However, even that needs to use PQC internally, because first of all, you need all sides to have a quantum computer for QKD to take place. And that's not going to be viable for, say, someone with a phone. They don't have a quantum phone anytime soon. Additionally, it needs to use PQC for its authentication, because at the end of the day, you need to actually confirm that this is coming from the right source. And QKD does not handle digital signatures. I don't believe that there is yet any any meaningful work around quantum-based digital signatures quite yet. So one thing I noticed about information theoretic security, like the one-time pad that Brad brought up, or quantum key distribution, is that at the end of the day, they still need to use PQC at some point. So I think it's clear that PQC needs to be priority, and those things are very promising, but needs to be R&D at this stage, because I believe that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer will come before those things come to full production, to full fruition. Because I mentioned, you need literally everyone on the planet to have a quantum computer for it to be taken effect meaningfully. So maybe it can be done through some internal communication, but PQC still needs to be the main adoption.
Thank you for that question, Luciana. We'll try to put in maybe two more questions before we close out. Caitlin Chadwick, thanks for your question. She's asking, with the threat of quantum, do you still recommend normal encryption for protecting data, or would other solutions like tokenization be better?
I'll let someone else if they want to answer, or I can give it a go again.
I can take a call on that. So see, we have to live with the technology that is currently available to us, because if we change our encryption model, we have to consider the cost, the disruption, the integration with other systems to which these cryptographic controls are going to work with. So if we are working in a perfectly PQC environment, then yes, we should probably discard all our encryption, but we are not there yet. And it's a risk that the business, not IT, not CISO, but the business need to understand and acknowledge, and probably put it on their register as an emerging risk that they should then visit every 6 months, 12 months as the technology changes and the investment become available.
Anything to add to that? Cover it? Great. Okay, and there's a couple questions on this, so I'll just kind of reframe. If we're kind of looking ahead, and we'll close out with this question, what are the kind of applied best next steps for organizations that want to learn more about their own quantum readiness, about PQC as a strategy, and start planning their migrations? And then probably second to that, when should organizations aim to have kind of completed their migration? And I'll leave this open to anyone. You guys can jump in with thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the second part of that question around when do they think they should complete it, I think that's very different for every environment. So, you know, you've got to map that out yourself, but understand that it can be quite complex, and it can break things. So you need to be cognizant of that. So start the planning now to understand, you know, how long will it take. Budget cycles as well for many organizations take a long time. You know, so understanding when you need to have this embedded and brought to a board's attention or brought to your, you know, extended leadership team's attention around, yes, I want to include this in the budget for the next cycle. So, you know, you need to be a bit proactive in understanding that. And it could, you know, for a small, you know, simple organization, it could be anywhere between 6 months and a year to do. For larger organizations, these are multi-year large programs of work that span across distributed networks. So a lot of planning involved. To start now.
Yeah. Look, could I jump on that and riff a little bit? So complete is a dangerous word. As a professional risk manager, we cannot seek to eliminate risk. What we can do is seek to address the risk within our appetite. And so for those places that matter, our risk should be within appetite, within a time frame that we can accept. And so for everyone, your risk appetite statement is your superpower here, as in terms of what is the impact of the loss or the availability, as in someone can read that data. What's the impact of that? What does it mean for us as a business? What does it mean for our customers? And how do we keep the likelihood of that happening within our appetite? And that's the conversation you need to have. And the risk appetite statement there is your superpower. It actually allows you to, or empowers you to make that decision. And also to push it out to the system owners to make sure that everyone is empowered to make that decision.
Yeah, I think it also, that risk appetite statement as well needs to be endorsed by other business leaders as well. It shouldn't just be, you know, up to a technology team to add that in. And I often find that a lot of risk appetite statements, yeah, so like they're written by, you know, other departments and they don't consider things like this. So being proactive and having it included, I think is a really good step as well for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, but the trick there is mapping the impact. And so the board's risk appetite statement will talk about the impacts. And if you can map the impact of a quantum threat, as in this particular thing is what goes wrong, and this is what happens to our data because of it, now we can talk about the board's risk appetite statement. We've started to map it into a framework that the business and the business leaders understand.
Great advice. Anything else to add there?
I might just add one thing as well about take care of the fundamentals first before taking on big scary words and big projects. I pitched to a business this week, had 600 staff, and they had no device management. So quantum's kind of irrelevant when you can't even localize and identify and enroll your devices in your own corporate network. So there's focus on the basics and then go for the get yourself the Porsche.
Yeah. And sometimes it just starts with a conversation. I know even just bringing it back, I was talking to a client and we were doing actually a case study testimonial. And I said, and this is a manufacturing client, they're in construction. So really not one of the industries that you think of as kind of first to adopt technology, and especially cybersecurity. And the CEO said, you know, I actually just ended up in a conversation with a cybersecurity expert. And that's when I realized that we need to look into this. And then he, you know, just started reaching out and talked to Sam. So I think it does begin with learning with the fundamentals, as you guys are saying, and then kind of going in from there. All right, well, we are just about at time, so I will take this time to thank our incredible panel, River, Sam, Brad, Billy, Sandeep, and to everyone who joined us today. We had a super full house, so I really, really appreciate this. We'll start our next series in 2026. And I think from today's panel, what's come through loud and clear is that quantum security isn't just a technology conversation, it's a leadership one. Definitely about resilience that we talked about, trust, and kind of that future readiness of every organization represented here. So on behalf of ExeQuantum, I want to thank you all for sharing your insights, your questions, your time, and your openness. And if you want to continue the conversation, do connect with all of our speakers on LinkedIn or reach out directly to the ExeQuantum team. We're always happy to collaborate on awareness sessions, readiness assessments, and next steps to becoming quantum safe. So thanks to everyone, and thanks for your time. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.